We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Hey, good morning and welcome to yet another edition of Free Association Radio. It's morning here. There are some of you that are listening where it's not morning, so good whatever, as we attempt to merge our consciousness through time and space in this very same moment together, no matter where we are. We're here, we're one, and hopefully I'll be talking about something that will be interesting for you and me over the course of the next 58 minutes. So it's Monday, no matter where you are. I guess maybe if you're in China, it might be Tuesday. I don't think I have a large listener base in China, though. That's my sense. So I think we can all mostly agree that it's Monday, which means we've just experienced a weekend. And it was an interesting weekend, I think, on some level for a number of us. I started to get into this thing. Okay, so what I want to talk about today, and then I'll tell you kind of where I want to eventually steer this craft, is, I listen to sports talk radio, and I'm not sure how much longer I can listen to it because it's just so inane. And it just seems like these talking points that every show and every host has is just recycled from show to show. So there's really nothing new or very interesting. And I listen to sports talk radio mostly out of habit, but also because it connects me to some weird kind of normalcy, which is rapidly evaporating. I would and have in the past describe it as being akin to soap operas. For me, sports talk radio is my soap opera. Anyway, this weekend, sports talk radio was all abuzz and a Twitter with the Joe Paterno and Penn State affair. And I've been tracking this for a while, and I know somebody very close to that situation who was impacted by that situation, not one of the boys, but I've written about her on my site, Dora McQuaid, who's replaced Jerry Sandusky on the mural. And the mural continues to be an object of controversy. Joe Paterno had a halo over his head prior to all of this. Now it was removed. There is a blue ribbon over his head. And I believe the blue ribbon is the Blue Ribbon Committee that has looked into the Paterno affair. And the Paterno affair really is the Sandusky affair, to be honest with you. And the Sandusky affair is the Second Mile affair. And Second Mile goes way beyond Jerry Sandusky. I mean, Second Mile was a foundation that was set up to help boys, not boys and girls, boys who had come from broken homes and didn't have strong father figures in their life. That's what it was set up as. And what it became was something far more beastly and horrific. It became like a zoo for these young boys, and a predator like Jerry Sandusky. And it wasn't just Jerry Sandusky. That was his foundation. He had connections with some of the most powerful people at Penn State, some of the most powerful people in the state of Pennsylvania. And he was involved in a major real estate deal with Joe Paterno, with Graham Spanier, with the former governor, or at that time he was the governor, Tom Corbett, the state of Pennsylvania. And it was a $115 million luxury apartment / condo complex right on the grounds of Penn State University. So that gives you some idea as to how powerful Second Mile was. And there was a guy by the name of O'Toole, I think his name is Ron O'Toole, who was the chairman of Second Mile, and he is also the most powerful contractor and builder in Happy Valley and in association with Penn State. That was his project, and he sat on the board of Second Mile as the chairman. So all this is kind of going on the side, and people don't really understand how powerful Second Mile was. Extremely powerful. And I had talked about this before on my blog, and I think to some extent on the show, that there was a radio host by the name of Mark Madden, who he's a sports guy, but he's kind of an edgy sports guy. He is in Pittsburgh. Not everybody likes him. And he came out with something last year, I think it was November of last year, where he basically said that this goes way beyond Jerry Sandusky, that Jerry Sandusky was essentially a front man and a pimp. By the way, if you're here looking for Mark Daniels, I'm sorry, he's not here. I apologize for that. He had a last-minute cancellation. I guess he just couldn't get away from Scarlett Johansson's house, over in the Hamptons. Says this is what rock stars do. So he's going to be on maybe next Monday. We'll talk about his record. It's Mercury retrograde. What can I say? So anyway, getting back to this whole Penn State deal, Mark Madden said, this goes beyond Jerry Sandusky. And I think it does. Because, what I know about perp networks is that it's not just one person. There's a lot for Jerry Sandusky to have done that for such a long time, it's not because he was such a fucking great linebacker coach or such a fucking great defensive coordinator. No. No. It's called enabling. So here's what happened over the weekend. The report was released on Thursday. The report I'm talking about is the Blue Ribbon Report, which was done by Louis Freeh, former head of the FBI, hired by Penn State. Penn State hired their own person to come in and investigate this. Okay? So there's already going to be a layer of taint, right? I mean, it's Penn State hiring their own investigator. He's not independent. He's a hired gun, and he's a contractor that has been contracted by Penn State. And so he came out with 278 pages, most of it quite damning, concerning Joe Paterno. Joe Paterno isn't even alive anymore. The guy's dead. I mean, conveniently, he was diagnosed with cancer right after all this stuff went down. And I remember he came out of his house. He has his house on campus, by the way. He came out of his house. He looked around. He waved at reporters. And that was the last anybody ever saw of Joe Paterno in public. Because after that, he went into the hospital. And once he got into the hospital, he was headed in one direction. And it wasn't the outdoor of the hospital. It wasn't the exit, okay? He was headed in the other direction. Permanent exit. And I'm sure that whatever he had, well, they probably helped him along quite a bit. I saw it with my father. My father, who the hell knows what he had, but they decided to give him the cancer pill, which is basically highly, highly concentrated dose of chemotherapy that you swallow. And he started taking that stuff, and boy, it accelerated his demise like you wouldn't believe. And they said, well, it will prolong your time here. You'll be able to, extend this out, 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe a year, 2 years. We don't know. We just don't know. We're just rolling the dice with you because we don't understand your body or your genetic makeup. Who knows? This could turn you into the Incredible Hulk, perhaps even. And that's kind of what they said, But you will die. They told me you will die. And I saw it. He did. He started taking that stuff, and boy, did he decelerate. Let me tell you. So, I'm sure Paterno got it. They got Paterno in there. I said, Joe, we're going to help you. Just take this. Sure enough, what happens? He's gone. And guess what? He is a scapegoat now. Now, I'm not saying that Joe Paterno is an angel because that halo got removed. He's not an angel. He was never an angel. This is a guy who deeply impacted not just football in Penn State, but he did other things as well. I mean, he donated a huge amount of money to build a library there, which is named after him. There's a statue on the campus. He was involved in Penn State life for close to 40 years. Maybe even longer than that. It might have been 50 years. I think he started in his 30s. He was 80 in his 80s when he passed away. Touched a lot of lives. And for, he's one of these guys where you talk to his former players and, they just sob. They would have run through a brick wall for Joe Paterno. So he was not just a football coach. He was the DNA of Penn State University, both on the field and off the field. If you think about college coaches in this country, basketball, football, wouldn't really think about college baseball. It's a minor sport in colleges. There are three guys that jump out and are on like the Mount Rushmore of college coaches. John Wooden, Bear Bryant, and Joe Paterno. Mike Krzyzewski will be there, by the way, from Duke. He will be there. He will be the fourth face on the Mount Rushmore of college coaches. But that's how iconic Joe Paterno is, which is why his fall from grace is so dramatic and perhaps even intentional. And I'll get into that a little bit. What I want to talk about is closure. And I touched a little bit on that on Friday when I had the wonderful Sonia Grace on the show. She was really terrific. Thought she was amazing. And we talked about forgiveness and healing, right? That if we are able to forgive, then we can heal. And we can heal ourselves and the condition of perhaps the other person as well. If not directly, then maybe indirectly. And then what I brought up was that I was in agreement with that, but to get to that place, I think there had to be a sense of real completion inside the person doing the forgiving. As long as as much of the truth or the entirety of the story is on the table, then I think it's incumbent upon us to gravitate towards forgiveness. But what's happened has been that we have not always been allowed to have as much information at hand so that we can fully forgive. You know, in our own personal lives, it's easier, I think, because we have direct access to people, and most of the time we can find out what's really going on, and it allows us to make choices based upon what we know. But in the grand scheme of things, in the big wide world, we don't always know those things. We only know part of the story, and yet we're being asked to forgive. And I don't think it's always that easy or that cut and dry. So what happened over the weekend is that now Joe Paterno is this dead scapegoat. He's got no way to defend himself. No way at all. And I talked with my friend Dora, and now this is a 278-page report done by the former investigator or former head of the FBI. And not one person that was part of that blue ribbon panel, part of that investigative team, not one person ever talked to any of Joe Paterno's family. And Joe Paterno's son was on the staff of Penn State University. He was on the football staff, so he would have been a very integral part of that investigation, both from an organizational standpoint and also from a familial standpoint. But nobody talked to them. How can you have a full and thorough investigation when you even talk to family members? Riddle me that, Batman. I don't think you can. So now what? Now, if you understand that, then what? Then what pops into your brain? What pops into your brain is, well, why didn't they do that? Is it because maybe the family would have shared something different? Is it because they're predisposed and they're Joe's family that they would lie about Joe? Or maybe they would, have some other information that would be very different to what's come out. But we wouldn't know. We don't know. Why? Because those conversations never took place. I know that for a fact. So what we have now is the body of evidence resting at the feet of a dead guy. And all these people across the country are doing this hand, especially on Sports Talk Radio, doing the hand wringing. Terrible. What an egregious abuse of power. The NC2A has got to step in and do something. Well, you got one guy going to jail, one guy dead, and how much more tragic can this be? This is what you hear on Sports Talk Radio for the most part. I actually listened to a show yesterday morning where the guy was actually asking some pretty interesting questions. I was like, wow, here's kind of an original thinker on Sports Talk Radio. So I decided to call in, and I gave my, little piece of what I thought was going on. And this guy and I had a really good cadence. And what was really interesting about this was I called in on my cell phone, and there's a long list of people to get in line to talk to the guy. And he grabbed me, didn't even know what I was talking about, really, just knew the topic I was going to talk. He grabbed me right before the top of the hour break. And then at that point in time, that station for me went away because it went to another station. And I could have continued to listen on my phone or whatever, but it was like, for whatever reason, the universe moved me up the queue to get this out. So then I began to think about Joe Paterno, the dead scapegoat. And I wrote about this in my newsletter. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you can get a copy of it later today with the bulk of this and more in the newsletter. So I began to think about Joe Paterno. And the name Paterno is very closely related to the name Paternus. Paternus meaning, paternos, or father. In fact, his name was Joe Pa. That was his name, Joe Pa. So he was this paternal figure at Penn State. He was the paternos of Penn State. It's interesting how his name is Paterno and how he conformed to this name that he had. And the mascot of Penn State is the Nittany Lion. Okay, keep this in mind. It's the Nittany Lion, and Nittany is the Nittany. It's the Nittany tribe, which was in that area of Pennsylvania, and I believe there's a mountain there, the Nittany Mountain, which surrounds Happy Valley, which is where the stadium and Penn State University is. So I began to think about this in terms of Mercury retrograde in Leo, and what Mercury retrograde Leo means. And Leo is what? It's the sun, and it represents in the chart the father. It represents in the chart the father. The moon is the mother, the sun is the father. This is how it works. And I thought about this. Oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting. And then began to get into the lion theme a little bit. Nittany Lion, Leo, Jopog, sun, right? And so it started to kind of cogitate and ferment in my brain. And then I began to think about Sandusky. And I thought to myself, well, that's an interesting name. What would happen if I broke down the name Sandusky? And the name Sandusky can be broken down into San and Dusky. San, if there was an S after the San, it would be sans or sans or sans in French, which would mean without. However, without the S, San or San is short for saint. Here in California, we have San Francisco, which is short for St. Francisco or St. Francis. The place where I grew up, San Jose, short for St. Joseph. Right? So San is part of the name, and then Dusky is the other part of the name. And Dusky means darkening or dark, right? So what is Sandusky? It is Saint Darkening or Saint Dark. And this is the guy that ran the program. And what we saw, or what I saw with all of this, was that Joe Paterno was this solar figure who was emanating this idea of the solar paternus, the kind of the life force, really, of that community. And not just of that community, by the way. It was college football. College football in the 20th century, and even the 21st century, because the guy was so old, was synonymous in many ways with Joe Paterno. He represented the college ideal, the coach that was the center of all things, the sun from which all things emanated. That's what he represented. And what has happened now? Well, he's become a dark sun. He has been transformed into a dark sun. Think about that. A black sun. Because now he's entombed in darkness. His sun has set. But not just his sun has set, but his reputation has set. And when we experience hero worship or idol worship or any kind of solar worship that we project onto another being, we have a relationship with that being or with that symbol, and it's an emotional relationship. And that energy is theoretically positive. Like Joe Paterno inspired people. He inspired people because he worked tirelessly to build young men's lives and to show an example that through hard work and dedication and teamwork, I mean, all of these American ideals, if you did it and you did it Joe's way, you'd be a success. You'd be a success on the field, and you'd be a success off the field as well. Now, Penn State, other than this terrible, terrible scandal, didn't have many scandals. One of their biggest scandals was this guy Curtis Enos, who had an agent buy him a suit. And Graham Spanier, the president at the time, thought it was a terrible idea, so terrible that he kicked Curtis Enos off the team. Even though Curtis Enos was graduating, it didn't really matter. But he was going to some award ceremony, and the guy needed a suit. His agent bought him a $300 suit. And that, for Graham Spanier, was worse than what happened with Jerry Sandusky. It was worse. That's how he dealt with it. So Jerry Sandusky, Saint Darkness, helped create a black sun. What happened with all of those feelings of warmth radiating towards Joe Paterno, the Paternists, the father figure. Well, all those feelings are going in the other direction now. People are feeling guilty, resentful, depressed. They're sick. They don't understand it. So now you've literally have millions of people around this country who are emanating really dark energy. And why? Why is that? Well, it's because something has happened. Something has happened here. And they've turned this Paternus, this solar figure, into a black sun, which is now, instead of radiating, sucking the life force out of people. That's what's happening. That is what's happened with this event. That's where we are now with it. It's exactly where we are with it. And what's unfortunate is that when I listen to sports talk radio, people think that they have closure, that there's closure around this. There's not closure. There's going to be civil suits. Graham Spanier is even suing the school and the FBI now because he thinks he's being treated unfairly. So anyway, this is where it's at. This is where this Paterno thing is at, and this is a clear example as to why being able to forgive is so challenging, because we don't have a clear enough level of awareness to make a fully informed moral decision to do that. Should we, to forgive Jerry Sandusky, couldn't do that now anyway. To forgive Joe Paterno, well, we couldn't really do that anyway. If we knew more, well, then maybe we could. Maybe. Not sure. It's a pretty unforgivable act for a lot of these boys. All of them, actually. And then I began to think, I see there's a caller here. I'm going to get to you in a little bit. And then I began to think, well, what's the real dialogue that we need to have around this? And I thought about, Mercury and Leo retrograde. And the real dialogue, I think, isn't about Jerry Sandusky, and it's not about Joe Paterno. It's not about Graham Spanier. but it's about what happened to those boys in their personal lives so that their families were broken. And as a result, they had to go outside of their family to get help. And the worst possible thing happened to them. They put their trust into somebody that could help them, and that trust was violated by a very predatory force. But I think the dialogue needs to center on what happened to them, what happened to their lives, what happened to their fathers, what happened to their families, so that they were split like atoms, open, vulnerable, wounded. Because I'll tell you right now, if those kids were at home and they had a family, a nuclear family, they're not running the second mile. They're not. They're at home. They're out with their dad playing football or baseball or in the shop. Because Mercury retrograde Leo, where we are right now, theoretically should prompt us to go back in time and to understand. Leo represents kids, it's children. And I think the dialogue needs to take place as to, and I'm not blaming those parents, but I think that we've gotten into this place in our culture where it has just become too easy to bail out on relationships, especially relationships with our kids. And I understand it. I understand it firsthand. I'm a single dad. I didn't want to be a single dad. And that's on the record. I didn't want to be a single dad. But it was so challenging that it was hard for the two of us to cohabitate together. But at the same time, I did not want that to happen. And I think what occurs, and this is where it gets, for me, quite tragic and sad, is that when two people split up, the tension doesn't really change. It's not like, oh, boy, wow, whew. Get rid of that. Guess I can breathe now, kick back, have a couple of beers, watch whatever the hell I want, and walk around in my underwear, pick my nose, and grab my crotch, and, I feel really good about my life now. It's not quite like that. It might be a little bit, but it's not quite like that. Whatever tensions there were that caused people to split up and separate, they get exacerbated after that happens. And people wind up hating each other. So then what if, and I experienced this. I experienced so much pressure at a certain point where it was like, I was ready to throw in the towel. It's like, I've had enough. I can't do this. That's what my thoughts were. And so, I thought of, well, if I could just go somewhere else and have a new life, I can just, wash the stain out of that bad memory, that bad relationship right out of my brain and right out of my heart. But I kept coming back to the fact that would not be the right thing to do, no matter what amount of pain I was going through. And I had to talk to a lot of people at times. So on some level, I'm sympathetic, and I understand that. I understand what happens to people when they split up. And I see it in men, quite frankly, who can be very mercenary and just cut off, boom, they're done. They move halfway across the country, get a new life, a new wife, new kids, and the other kids are just, they're a memory, a distant memory. I've seen that. I've seen it happen. I understand how it can't happen. But I think really what we really have to have this dialogue about is how the families get split up, why they split up. The level of expectations that have been placed upon raising children in America is almost staggering. Or having a family in America, or even living in America, is staggering. I got a friend who is a good friend, and I've known him longer than almost anybody else outside of my mother. I've known him since I was 11 years old. Okay, and he's having a political awakening. He's waking up, and this guy's fiery. I used to play football with him, and he was the one guy that you would not want to go up against one-on-one because he was just primal fury. And so I'm watching him now go through this political awakening. It's fascinating. And he said to me yesterday, he said, you know what, man? He said, my wife doesn't want me going on the internet and doing all this political stuff. And I'm like, really? That's interesting. You know, and I looked, I was there, I've been there, okay? And I thought to myself, well, this is one of the, and I've thought this for a while, this is one of the reasons why we have been in so much trouble, because there's a major, major rift and schism in a lot of ways between threat and perceived threat, and how men and women internalize that. You know, and I told him, I said, you know, 1,000 years ago, you were out in the plains somewhere, or in a cave somewhere, or in a very small village somewhere, and you were out in the periphery. You were looking, you know, you and your buddies were out on the periphery looking to see who could come into your little, you know, squat or whatever, and, you know, steal your women or steal your food or steal your kids. And that's what the men did 1,000 years ago. They were vigilant. And then over time, what has happened is that kind of vigilance has been outsourced to the to the armed forces and the police departments of this world. And so what now do men do to fulfill their kind of original role, which is to be vigilant, which is to take care of the family of the tribe? Well, the threat is no longer, you know, a woolly mammoth or a band of brigands, you know, who think that they can just come in and overpower you and take what you have. That's not the threat. The threat is an imperceptible threat now. The threat for a lot of people is the threat of going to the poorhouse permanently because the economy is about to go off a cliff, or the threat is that the food that they're going to eat is so genetically modified that over the course of the next 10 years of their lives, that they might, you know, wind up becoming some sort of Frankensteinian chimera, you know, or maybe the threat is the threat of, you know, not being able to drive down a road freely, being stopped and being asked to show your identification every 30 miles. I mean, the threat is now much more imperceptible, and that's what he is addressing, is the imperceptible threat. And for him and his wife does not like that, because his wife is invested in security, and he's invested in freedom, and the two of them can't commingle. And this has always been the way it's been. But what's happened is that we make these agreements, you know, like, okay, I'll be less invested in freedom because I don't want to ruffle your security, because when we go to sleep at night, I want to be able to have sex with you. Or I want you to love me, adore me, and laugh at my jokes. So I'll be less invested in this to keep your sense of freedom and your sense of security intact. Don't make any waves. And it kind of starts, you know, in that area, in that place. And I'm not saying that this is why families fail. I'm not saying that at all. But I can tell you that it plays a role in that. It plays a role in it. So I think we have to, the dialogue should not be about necessarily Jerry Sandusky or Joe Paterno. It's about how those kids got there in the first place, and what can we do in order to create a culture and a world that honors birth, it honors life. You had a kid, you may as well, you know, stand by the kid, okay? Come on now. I think that's where the discussion around this needs to go. The sun is life force. Mercury retrograde is life force. or at least it's the exploration and the reexamination of life force and its progeny, kids. All right, let's go to this 202 line and see who's on there. Hello.
Hi, Robert. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I've been listening to you for quite a while. I don't call in very often. I think I called in maybe one time last year. But I'm actually a friend of Sister Myra's.
Oh,
and
cool.
I've heard you on Cosmophysics with my other friend, Ra'aku.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, that's his show.
Yeah.
And he has had Kayer kind of host his show for him, but it is Ra'aku's show.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a part of those are a part of my group of friends. Mm-hmm. And I think you did great on the show when you came to visit the show and you did a reading and all that good stuff. And mm-hmm. I just think you're marvelous. I think you're a gifted reader and all that great stuff. So I wanted to call and tell you that I enjoy the show. I enjoy what you do. And I tell you, if you actually talk on your show and have no guests, I'm completely happy because I love you're very edgy. And I like how you kind of go out there on the edge sometimes and bring up some very important and sometimes controversial and uncomfortable topics. But I think they're necessary for the public to kind of hear these things, and it kind of gets us in a mode of preparedness and understanding what's going on cosmically and as well as what's going on above as well as below.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you listening and calling in. Kayer's going to be on me on Wednesday.
Okay.
And we're gonna kick it on Wednesday. But it's a challenging place to be sometimes because I lose people every now and then. It's like people say, you're too judgmental, or you're too this, you're too that, and it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry, we have to part ways, but this is how I'm evolving, and I try my best to be fair and not be completely dismissive of people and their situations, but this is kind of I just follow my muse, and that's this is where it's taken me, and my life is pretty much an open book too. It's like
it is.
So I'm not going to try to get out on a limb if I haven't gone there yet. So
I never felt that you were judgmental. Never, ever, ever. I think it's a perfect blend and balance, the way that you get the information out. You're sharing your opinions on it. And, my kind of perspective with things like that, when I have people that disagree with me, I just come to a conclusion that they're right on their frequency and I'm right on mine. Yeah. And so they're probably tuning into the wrong frequency, and they will probably need to be having a discussion or dialogue or listening to people that are on their frequency. I am on your frequency, Robert, so...
Oh, cool. I like that. That sounds great.
I'm not at odds with anything that you say, anything that you share. I'm not at odds with it at all. I actually called in to get one of your wonderful readings.
Oh, okay. Well, I tell you what, this is not normally the day, but you've been so laudatory. I can't say no now.
Aww.
Give me your birthday. What's your name, by the way?
I'm sorry. My name is Romaine.
Romaine. Okay. When is your birthday, Romaine?
It's 8/16/66, and I was born at 9:38 a.m.
Okay. Let's do this. 8/16/66. I'm just going to look at a solar chart.
Okay.
And because we don't have a lot of time, this is only a 1 hour show today, so.
Right.
8/16/66. So, help me out with your moon. You got a Leo moon, is that right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so you're a triple Leo. What's your ascendant?
It's Libra.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so you're triple Leo, and straight out of the gate, the Mercury retrograde is going to be really, really big for you. And your boy, the 16th, is that what you said?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
16th.
And is your Venus in Cancer or Leo? Because it looks like it's 20. Is it 0 degrees, Leo? Venus?
It's Leo.
So you're quadruple Leo. Holy Moses! Wow. Okay. So this Mercury retrograde is going to be extremely powerful for you. It started at 13 degrees, which means it's probably very close to your moon, and then it's going to head backwards, and it's going to touch your natal Mercury, your natal Venus, all the way to 0, because it does go into Cancer. So literally, Mercury is going to have a parade from your moon all the way through to, I believe, Cancer, Jupiter at least. Yes, Jupiter, and then it's going to move forward again. Your Jupiter in Cancer. So this is going to be a really interesting time for you in terms of like time traveling and going back and looking at your childhood and looking back at your adolescence and looking back on your parents and what that was like. I was just writing about this in my newsletter today, that this kind of journey with Mercury retrograde is sort of akin to soul retrieval. And we think about soul retrieval like in terms of past lives and things like that. But I really think that this Mercury retrograde can be very powerful for people to go back into their childhood and go back into their adolescence and see, where things got kinked up or knotted up or broken, and begin to have a more nurturing and adult relationship with those moments. It's a great kind of time to do like inner child work, because I think a lot of us now are getting to the point where we're more mature and we're willing to take on those kinds of subtle relationships. So for you, it's really important. One of the things that with Venus and Leo and Mercury going back into and touching your Venus would be to remember like the first time you fell in love. What was that like? Was your heart broken? Did it soar? Where did it go? How complete are you with that? Because my sense here with all of these Leo planets, especially with Mercury going backwards and then forwards, is you get to rewrite the script in a number of different areas of your life. Because Mercury is communication, right? It's what we say, it's what we speak, it's what we write. So going backwards across all those planets gives you the opportunity to review every single station. Moon, emotions; Mercury, again, communication, memory, creative expression; Venus, personal relationships. So the review is on. And then as Mercury goes back into Cancer, and then it moves forward, then you get to rewrite the scripts in those areas. What do you want? What do you want out of relationships? What do you want in terms of being able to communicate, being able to share, being able to communicate expressively? It's not just communication. Leo is very expressive. Leo is poetry. Leo is singing. Leo is speechifying. How do you want to dramatically and creatively share your thoughts with the world? And then, then your emotions. It's like, how can you realign your emotions? What's important to you emotionally? With Libra on the ascendant and all that Leo, in terms of your emotional needs, you've got some pretty high standards. And not in a bad way, by the way. I'm not saying your standards are not out of line. But you have high standards, and I think it's important with this Mercury retrograde to check in with that and make sure that you are living and abiding by those standards, because here comes Saturn into the picture. I don't know the degree of your ascendant, but I'm sure Saturn is close to your first house or has been in your first house, and that's a real reset again in terms of how you interface with the world, how you interface with relationships. And my feeling and what I've been seeing with this Saturn direct, especially as it's been kind of dancing with the Venus retrograde, is I'm seeing more and more people get together. I'm seeing like soul alignment start to take place with people. It's happening. And it's happening for a reason, because we're entering into a very powerful time with Saturn in Scorpio. And when Saturn moves into Scorpio, people that are going to be together, and that doesn't mean that if you're not with somebody, it's not going to happen. I don't want to say that, but people are going to have this opportunity now to get into a very powerful place with tantric sexuality and exploring each other's bodies in a very sacred way. And the way that that's done is by two people coming together that really love each other, understand each other, and are a match for one another. And so for you, I think it's important for you to stay on point with really the high quality that you are looking for in your own life in relationship to other people that come into your life. And I think it could be a wonderful, absolutely wonderful time with a lot of the Leo energy coming up. You get a major reset on all those stations. And then next year, we've got Jupiter going into Cancer next year, so you're going to have a Jupiter return next year. You're going to have Jupiter crossing your Mars next year, which means you're going to have more physical energy next year, more expansion. I don't know where you are with family or kids or home, but certainly all those areas get major boost for you in 2013. So a lot of it now in 2012, especially with this Mercury retrograde, can set you up for the things that you really value, because Cancer has a lot of value associated with it. Family values, legacy, nurturing, maternal values, feminine values. So I really see 2013 as being a spectacular year for you, quite honestly. But don't sleep on this Mercury retrograde. I think it's very important for you.
That's wonderful, and that's actually you've really just horned in on a lot of important things that I've been dealing with as far as relationships. I had a relationship that ended in 2010 with a Libra guy that I love very much, and we parted ways, but I was told that this man is actually my twin soulmate and the person I should be with. I have been in contact with him on and off this year since we parted. The love is still there, and actually Sister Myra, who is my, I had told you, we're friends and we talk quite a bit. She believes that on some level that this is the person that will return to me, that there will be a soulmate connection between us. And I'm wanting that to take place, and I've been preserving myself and being very selective about who I spend my time with because I really would like to see him and I come back together.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the intention is incredibly important. Holding the space, keeping the space like you're doing is very important as well. And, Mercury retrograde, what's it doing? It's going to be crossing over your Venus. So I think if there's going to be an opportunity or a time for this to occur, this could actually be a very good time. So, I think you're on it. That's what I think.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert.
Okay,
I
you're
welcome.
welcome.
love you, man.
Okay, love you too. Thank you for calling in.
Okay, I'll hold while the show is still going.
Okay, all right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so that's how we do it here. We just we do a little improv. People want a reading. We do that. There's somebody calling in from the 512. We've only got 7 minutes left. Let's just talk to them and see what they want to say. Hello, you're on the air.
Hey, Robert. This is Dave from Austin, Texas.
What's going on, Dave?
How are you today?
This is my mirror mage from Austin. I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. It's what a couple of weeks I've been through, but it's clearing up, and I feel much better. And you really got to me when you started talking about this child thing and the dilemma and the challenges involved in breakups. But I've got a son that's like 35 or something. So many years ago, I realized when this was all happening to me that it was a setup. People are going to cringe out there when I say this, but, more families have been broken up over child support than anything ever invented. And, once you get the idea and the drift of all this, we've been set up.
Uh-oh. Dave dropped. Come on back, Dave. Damn, I was waiting. That was like the big punchline. We've been set up. We have been set up, absolutely. Been set up to turn against one another. That's how we've been set up. And the court of law does nothing but enable that. And of course, lawyers get to make a lot of money as a result. I'm not sure if Dave is going to make it back. So I'll call back on Wednesday. He's usually a Wednesday guy. I've got 4 minutes left. So there we have it, the Monday show. And if you have a kid, hug your kid. If and if you have the ability to, build a bridge, build it. I mean, this is where we are now. We have to close these gaps. We have to close the gaps as much as we can. And that doesn't mean that we say yes to everything, but we have to close the gaps as much as we can because the world is such a fragmentary place. So anyway, all right. I want to thank everybody for listening in and calling in, and we'll get Dave back on the air on Wednesday. We'll make sure he calls back in. I'm going to have Coach Kair. He's going to come on the show on Wednesday, and we're going to talk about there's going to be a big square happening. It's actually a cross, and it's a cardinal cross. It's happening on Tuesday with the moon in Cancer, Mars in Libra, Pluto in Capricorn, Uranus in Aries, and we'll talk about that on Wednesday. The moon will have moved out of direct opposition of Pluto. It'll still be part of the cross, but it won't be so directly affected. So we'll have a few hours to examine the impact of this major cross that's happening on Wednesday. And Kair will be here to help sort it all out, and that's going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Okay, so we'll see you on Wednesday. And you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step on what's possible. Have a good Monday. See ya.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.